Hey, what's up, Swits? I'm Old Salty Sean, aka Dalron Telvani, and with Lost Depths around the corner and the final DLC of the chapter on the horizon, let's take a quick moment to chat about the pros and cons of the year-long adventure idea. For any new players who don't know, the year-long adventure DLC expansion plan began back with Elsewhere. Before Elsewhere, questing zones generally bled into each other from one to the next. Orsinium had a few story beats that picked up from the main quest, Morrowind led into Clockwork City, which led into Somerset, with a couple other miscellaneous releases thrown in between. Then came Elsewhere, which began with the Wrathstone dungeons, leading into a full expansion of Elsewhere before another dungeon duo with Scalebreaker, and then capping off with the Dragonhold DLC in the other half of Elsewhere. Now, when this concept first released, it felt like a great idea. Having a consistent story thread to follow along all the DLC of the year, with an extra special ending questline for players who put in the work to do the full Overland story was a really neat thought. Sorry, I was laughing because I implied that Overland questing takes effort. Anyway, it was a neat concept that made the smaller year-end DLCs pack a bit more punch, and in my opinion was generally pretty well received. Then it happened again in Greymoor, then again in Blackwood, and now we're still here doing it again in High Isle. Now, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with the concept of a continued story thread. That's actually the part of the year-long adventure that I like the most. What's frustrating is just how much these events seem to borrow from one another. Every expansion, we're introduced to another big bad on the verge of causing total catastrophe. The player characters and their allies manage to defeat them in the nick of time, and without fail, the big bad escapes and lives to fight another day. Cut to an award ceremony in the capital city where every guest NPC you helped out along the way stands around and tells you how incredibly cool you are and how big your muscles are. This is often the point where the most important quest NPC reminds you that it just doesn't quite feel like it's over yet. Another dungeon DLC later and we arrive at the Q4 DLC where we manage to stop generally a smaller scale plan by the same opposing faction. When that wraps up, you unlock your super special bonus quest for being such a good boy or girl where you finally get your showdown with the big bad. Evil is defeated, good triumphs, and the day is saved. Until next year, when we're going to do it all over again. Now, really quickly, I'm going to get into a couple of pretty small spoilers for High Isle, so if you still haven't finished that questline and don't want any spoilers, pause the video and skip to this timestamp right here. When High Isle was first announced, the one thing that really stuck with me is just how cool the Ascendant Lord looked. I wasn't excited about the lore. Breton lore isn't really my thing. I'll let you in on a secret, I don't play fantasy games to play humans, and I'm definitely not going to play the French humans. But then you see this dude who looks like he belongs on the cover of Dark Souls 4. Sure, he's still a quest boss, which means he's going to die in 2 full rotations of your abilities, but I can suspend my disbelief if the story makes him out to be like a total badass. Then the story previews started coming out about how the Ascendant Order basically want to eat the rich and burn their money, and people understandably started asking Zos if they could join the Ascendant Order. That's when I thought we had a really compelling villain for a story arc. I figured I had a pretty good idea of where the story was going to go based on that alone. A zealot revolutionary leader in his self-righteous destructive quest unleashes something he shouldn't and almost brings ruin to everything. Then in the Q4 DLC, we defeat the bigger new evil, and the other NPCs would have to reflect and ask themselves how society needs to change in order to prevent the rise of another group like the Ascendant Order from rising to power again. Sure, it's a pretty cookie-cutter story, all things considered, but it's something serviceable for an MMO. Then the community page featured the Ascendant Magus. Right away, it became abundantly clear what to expect from High Isle's story. The Ascendant Lord would be in the background, would cut a couple of Darth Vader-style speeches, and would go hang out somewhere else until High Isle wrapped up, and we could face the true boss at the end of the Q4 DLC. The Ascendant Magus, on the other hand, would be the upfront and active Starscream, who we'd be fighting to thwart at every turn, and you can guess which one would be the final boss of the High Isle expansion. I'm kind of numb to this routine after having to do it 4 times, but I can only imagine what it might feel like for new players who see all this promotional art for High Isle with the Ascendant Lord plastered all over it, only to essentially be told, oh, you don't get to fight him. Wait until Q4, then you get to fight him. Oh, and by the way, you're going to need to either buy that DLC or be an ESO Plus member for that. On the flip side, the Q4 DLC has quests that are basically locked unless you own the base expansion, so if you're just buying the DLC without the expansion, you're missing out on content that you paid for. Now, I don't want to be overly negative. I'm trying to get away from that as a content creator, and there's still a lot that the year-long story does do right. I'm actually a big fan of quests, content, and ESO, at least when it comes to the expansions and DLCs. The base game quests are generally awful and could really do with a facelift at some point in the future, but the expansion quests are usually very good. The writing is really serviceable, the voice acting is usually fantastic, and there's a lot of memorable characters that I genuinely get excited to see return in later acts of the story. I genuinely pop off whenever my favorite characters like Naryu or Asher pop up elsewhere in other storylines, and we get a chance to chat about what they've been up to since I last saw them. The Sun and Shadow questline is one of my favorite quests in games, period. Even ignoring my obvious Telvanni bias, I just generally think it's a really well told story. My only complaint about modern quests is that they're too easy, and the player character consistently sounds like an idiot in their dialogue options. But the year-long adventure does do a lot of things right. The first time the concept was introduced, it was really exciting to know that we get a whole year to build this story and see it expand. And again, the idea that there was an extra incentive to do all the content to see the full picture was really cool and a really good reason to do everything. But it's gotten really formulaic and predictable and needs to be mixed up. The award ceremony at the end of the expansion was a really nice touch. I'm the kind of person who likes to do all the side quests and see everything before the end of a story in RPGs, and I know that's really common among Elder Scrolls players. So seeing everyone that we helped out along the way show up again and get some bonus dialogue with them was really cool, and now I make sure that I haven't missed any quests before the end so I get dialogue with everybody. But it feels really copy-pasted when every time we do it in the same capital city throne room, like each and every time. On another positive, the dungeon design team is absolutely killing it lately. It really seems like they're making whatever they want to make and just sprinkling in whatever they need to for it to be associated with their year-long adventure, and I'm here for that. Here, fight this entire ghost city that nobody knows what happened to. It may or may not be related to Hermaeus Mora. I'm sure the Ascendant Order are doing something there that needs to be stopped. Here, we want you to fight through this alien ruin protected by Cultus of Meridia with a f***ing Final Fantasy style last boss. Why? I don't know. Part of the Wrathstone is in there for elsewhere. Say what you want about the mechanics in them, the theme for the last few years of DLC dungeons has been really excellent, and some of my favorite in the game, period. But what we're missing out on are a lot of the smaller DLC packs that were really fun. I really think Murkmire is one of the perfect examples of this. Murkmire has a main plot, and a lot of things happen in it, but a lot of the story of the expansion is just like, hey, check out this crazy hostile environment and learn what it's like to be someone who chooses to live here. Isn't that fucking crazy? And those kind of microcosms of story are a lot of what attracted me to this game to begin with. There's still so much of Tamriel and beyond that I still want to see. The updates we had like Orsinium and Murkmire were a lot less world-ending threats and a lot more slices of life of Tamriel, and I really miss that. And we lose out on that possibility when the Q4 DLC is always the yearly expansion pack part 2. I don't know, maybe it's just part of me that still wants to go to places like Necrom and have it be about what's actually going on in Necrom and not what some weird cult is doing in Necrom. I don't know, I'm just saying it'd be really cool to go there, ESO team. It's a necropolis made from the bones of a monster Vivek killed. That sounds really cool. Could sell some really cool houses there. Cool quests to make maybe. Queen Irene even has a history in the city, so the AD simps could be on board. I don't know, just throwing out stuff that you guys should probably do. Yo, did Sean really just ask for more Dark Elf content when we already have 2 base game zones, a full expansion, and Clockwork City? Yes. Yes, I did. I'll never stop asking. Give me more, Zos. I don't care what races other people play. Give me more of what I want. Anyway, this has been a super long rant, and thank you for sticking it out if you made it this far in. This is an opinion piece, and I always welcome discussion, as long as you keep it civil in the comments below. Let me know what you think. Maybe you love the formula, maybe you think I'm stupid, maybe you just think I've got an ugly face. Let me know. Thank you as always to the fabulous members of House Telvanni for keeping productions running around here. You're all absolute legends. If you want to support the channel, consider becoming a member today, but also something as small as a like or a subscribe goes a really long way. Next week is another banter upload. If you don't know what that is, I suggest checking out the one from last month. It's one of my favorites that we've ever made. Banter videos are my favorite content to make for the channel. Despite getting only a fraction of the views, I put twice the amount of effort into editing those as I do my guides, so please consider checking those out. But with all that out of the way, I've been Old Salty Sean saying smoke skooma and worship Daedra.
Stand up. There you go. You were dreaming.